8 and 9, it says, although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. And after he had been made perfect, he became responsible for everlasting salvation to all those obeying him. So it's an interesting connection there. He learned obedience from the things he suffered. And after he had been made perfect. You think of Jesus Christ as always been perfect, but he was made perfect. And there's a reference to the next page. Let's see. Hebrews 7:28. And for the law appoints as high priests men who have weaknesses, but the word of the oath sworn after the law appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. Now, this idea of being made perfect, like we're supposed to become perfect. It's obvious that he's made perfect through the suffering and through the experience of the human experience. So that he is able to make petitions for us with his Heavenly Father, knowing our weakness, knowing the struggles and the stresses we're under, and the enemy that we're confronted with. And that's what makes him such a perfect high priest.
I think it sounds like you're saying that Jesus wasn't exactly perfect before all that.
No, I said he was perfect all his life. But he was made perfect for this position of high priest because of having suffered and having gone through obedience, knowing, and so he is, as a high priest, petitioning God on our behalf.
We talked about this. We talked about this a little. I think it was last week, and that was the reason why Jesus was a great high priest is because even though he was the Son of God, he was also fully man, and as a fully man, he was tempted at all points, just like all of us here. But what makes him great is the fact that he never yielded to those temptations. You see, we cannot know, we talked about this, I think, last week, we cannot know the power of sin until we're victorious over sin. Because you never know the depth of the power of sin until you're victorious over sin. If you still are yielding to sin, then you do not fully understand the power of sin. It's only when you're victorious over sin that you understand what it truly means for sin to come upon you and be victorious. Because you never understand completely the power of sin until you're victorious over it.
You can put that in like military terms where one army faces another army, but the one army will never know the true strength of the other army unless they completely conquer them. Because they could be hiding things in the back.
I think a good example of where Jesus Christ was made perfect for us is like, let's say in this church, if there was someone who had overcome alcoholism and did it through going to God directly, through prayer and so forth, and really, gotten out from him that stress or whatever that caused him to turn to alcoholism. And now he's really free of that burden. So if someone comes into the church that has a problem with alcohol, he's really the one that can help this person. Because he can speak to him from his own experience and how he was able to come away from it. And so Jesus, having gone through the human experience, not only being tempted, but also
overcoming those temptations.
Overcoming the temptation. But being put through hell.
He was the
Brian's been trying to talk for 3 minutes now. Brian.
Go ahead, Brian.
Hi. If we look at the Strong's definition of that phrase, made perfect, we find it to say to complete, that is literally accomplish or figuratively consummate in character, consecrate, finish, fulfill, make perfect. So what this is talking about is Jesus was sent here for a particular task, and he had completed that task. And that task was completed when he died for our sins and rose again in new life. So this isn't as much about what we do as it is about what Jesus came to do and what He completed. Jesus would be no more perfect if He had not even stepped upon this earth. But what this is saying is He was made perfect. He completed what He set out to do. He accomplished His task.
It has nothing to do with sin. His task, not character.
And I just wanted to say that He was the fullness of the Godhead bodily.
Yeah.
He was equal with God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the word that's translated there, we've run into it before. It can be translated either perfect or matured or completed.
The other word that's interesting is that word feared. We think of Jesus in the garden as afraid to die. But if we look at Strong's on that, it says that properly cautioned as religiously reverence piety, by implication dread. Jesus was never afraid of death.
No.
Jesus dreaded the suffering that He would have to do in order to accomplish the task that He was put here to do.
Like the beating He took.
He knew the full implication, the full weight of what that sin was.
Yeah.
He was never afraid of it. He was never afraid to die. He was never afraid that He would not live again. What He was is He was dreading having to do it, having to go through it. And that's why He said, if it would be possible to take this cup from me,
Yeah.
He knew it wasn't possible. And that was the dread that He was crying out in great sweats and of blood.
Yeah.
He was dreading going through it. It wasn't that He was fearing going through it. The better word that they could have used here is that it was dread.
Hey, Pastor, can you explain verse 10? Back over now.
That's in the next chapter.
It's called Mel.
Call of God.
Yeah,
Mel, who was that, or what is that?
That's in the next chapter.
We'll talk about king and priest. He was a king and priest.
When you go back to your studies, read the first 12 verses of chapter 7, and then when we discuss it, it'll all be clear to you.
What if we die first?
She said Genesis 18:14. You can
Then you won't have to study
Genesis 14, 18.
I'll go anymore.
Genesis 14, 18. We'll read about this.
Genesis 14:18. Read on your own, Steve.
Then ask Jesus if you die first, okay?
And just one little point on verse 10.
That's a good point, Brian.
One little point on verse 10 where it says that because He has been designated by God a high priest in the manner of Melchizedek. In the word-for-word translation, it refers to it as the order of Melchizedek. To think that one person, Melchizedek, could be referred to in the manner of Melchizedek or in the order of Melchizedek. He set a standard. He alone. There was no others that bore the same standard until Jesus Christ. It's an interesting thing. That's apparently, in this way you think about it, it's a very high standard. For one person to set a standard, to say in the order of or in the manner of.
Like I said, God must have liked that.
For all those centuries in this way.
Yeah.
Now, one other point here. Let's
We're
not
almost done, I
forget
think.
that,
I'll just stay here.
like we said,
We're almost done. I think I'll just stay here.
Jesus learned obedience, and He did what in verse 9? He became to all those who obey Him the source of eternal salvation. Once again, God, Jesus, wants our complete obedience.
Yeah. And the actual word is obeying. Obeying. So it isn't like you obeyed and now you're good to go. It's obeying. It's lasting life.
Continually
Yeah,
obeying.
it's a continual process.
It's
of
present
obeying.
tense for us, past tense for Him.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but obeying is something that you're doing ongoing. It's like when the Lord's Prayer, forgive those who trespass against us as we forgive those who trespass against us. As being continually. If we expect to be forgiven, we have to be forgiving.
Okay, Steve, you got the last 4 verses.
11, 12, 13, or 14.
There's a pair of reading glasses up there.
Well, you can put mine on.
You need some glasses?
So you want to go by?
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Does that help you?
Immensely. It's like a large print now. About this, we have much to say that's hard to explain, since you have become dull in understanding. Although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic elements of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food. And everyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is unskilled in the word of righteousness. Solid food is for the mature, for those whose faculties have been trained by practice to distinguish good from evil. While you're just telling them that they're more mature than they should be by this time. And food is for the mature, for those whose faculties have been trained by practice. That means that you have to practice being good, practice being mature, to distinguish good from evil. And that reminds me what Job says, wisdom and understanding is. Wisdom is the fear of God, understanding is to depart from evil. They have to be able to practice to distinguish good from evil. So, something you said about being able to distinguish good from evil, it brings to mind what it says in, I think, 1 John, where he said there's some sins to pray about, and I'm not saying we should pray about those. It's where the term mortal sin comes from, and I'm not sure what sins he's talking about, or what degree of sin. But he says, I'm not asking you to pray about those sins. So you have to distinguish between good and evil. Smoking's evil. Thanks, Bobby, for that very much.
Anybody else?
Yeah. Let me find it here real quick. Well, it's mostly what he was talking about when he was talking about the difference between milk and meat. I don't know. I've been searching through the so-called Christian channels on cable, and I see the pastors with younger and younger faces. Back when this was all brand new, a student would be a disciple to his teacher for sometimes decades before he was given an appointment to a church.
At least not, under 35.
Yeah. And now I swear, I couldn't testify as to how old this guy is, but he looked like he was 19 years old and has his own TV ministry. Okay? Everyone's looking for the shortcut to the glory. And, telling us that's not the way to go.
Right? Yeah. It's interesting, this whole paragraph that Steve read, where it talks about you have become dull in your hearing, for although by now you should be teachers, you again need someone to teach you. And so, yeah, the book of Hebrews would really be applicable to Hebrews, to Jews. And they should be able to get and come into that new covenant and accept Jesus Christ, who after all was a Jew. And then, but in particular, we can see that there's a real effort with this book, this letter, to reach out to those who had been exposed to Jesus Christ or his teachings through the apostles, who were slipping back, starting to reclaim the law, or being persuaded to go back to the law, that they needed to come back and get into the strong teaching and get the understanding again.
As we go ahead to here, you notice in verse 11 it says, concerning him.